That's certainly important to try and stop any future abuse, but the abuses that have occurred should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. And as you said, Congress and our state legislatures should investigate this to ensure that it doesn't happen again.
Now,
and we stop it.
Now, reportedly with this Israeli foreign group, the Pittsburgh papers are reporting that they were involved with law enforcement, wiretapping anti-G20 groups. So I think the point you raised about were you being wiretapped, your Second Amendment group, I think that is very important.
I agree. I mean, we have individuals involved in our Second Amendment coalition from Second Amendment groups and sportsmen's groups that are across Pennsylvania from east to west, north to south. We have tens of thousands of Pennsylvanians that are represented by the groups that are involved with our coalition that's been the catalyst for our Second Amendment rallies that we've held now 5 years in a row. And we started these to try and stave off the attacks by the liberal gun-grabbing governor that we have that came out of Philadelphia, Ed Rendell. We were very successful with it. It's, my work to try and bring an end to the illegal alien invasion, working with state legislators for legalimmigration.com and Senator Pierce from Arizona and many others. We actually were noted. Our work as state legislators for legal immigration in Invasion PA report that put together was noted in a UN report back in early 2008. Mm-hmm. And that kind of sets you back on your heels a little bit when you realize that the UN is issuing reports with your name in it as a state legislator from the state of Pennsylvania. But then even furthermore, when you realize that not only is the UN doing some of these sorts of big brother oversight tactics, trying to intimidate, trying to push us back on our heels from standing up for the rights of Americans, for standing up for our nation, but that we have individuals that have been contracted out of country by our own government to do the same. It's an outrage.
Well, Representative Metcalfe, we know why they're contracting with the UN and the Israelis and others, because many police are refusing to break the law and to spy on citizens without warrants, to spy on mainline, nonviolent groups that represent the majority of Americans on top of it. I mean, over 70% in major polls are pro-Second Amendment. Over 70% in Gallup polls want to completely shut down the border. So here they are trying to intimidate mainline dissent that's also constitutional and nonviolent. Of course they're having to contract with foreign groups to do this.
Well, that's what every one of our military personnel takes an oath to uphold and defend our Constitution, and our local elected to state elected, our law enforcement certainly have the same responsibility. So the majority of our law enforcement, the majority of our military are patriotic citizens serving their neighbors, and can't be corrupted by the tyrannical hands that would like to move them in this direction.
Representative Metcalfe, I want to ask you a few more questions. We've only got about 8 minutes left with you, and we appreciate the time here today. But pulling back from this and looking at the big, wide spectrum of what's going on, what is happening to you is happening everywhere. I know it's happening here in Austin. I know there's Israeli groups and others spying on citizens. I know that Ron Paul, it came out in the news, and Tea Parties have been spied on by the Army. The Army leaked, yours truly and others, this stuff back in 2008 when our In the Fed rallies had the Army at them, and the Army report said, don't let them know you're Army. They may attack you. And of course, the Army personnel were so upset by this, they leaked the information to myself and others. But this is outrageous, and police and military and others need to know. When you've got foreigners or the UN or the Israelis or anybody else telling you to spy on American citizens, you have a duty, I think, to go public, not just leak the information, because this is a crime, and I'm really pleased to see major Pennsylvania papers talking about this being illegal.
Right. I agree with you, and that's the only way that we're going to defeat this type of activity and protect American lives, liberty, and property is to have American citizens standing up, whether they're in the military or whether they're in law enforcement, or if they're average citizens that are being targeted by this type of activity. People need to stand up and speak out and not be intimidated.
Well, after all the United States has done for Israel, why do you think Israel's so happy to have the ADL demonizing gun groups and Lou Dobbs and myself? Why do you think that there's other Israeli groups, running around spying on you? I mean, this is outrageous.
Well, that was one of my first thoughts was, as an American citizen, as a former soldier, as one who has been very supportive of standing with Israel against the attacks that they have endured by terrorists in their area of the world. That how is it that they would be linked into this type of an activity, or people from Israel being linked into this type of activity that is targeting the majority of the very people that have been supportive of Israel over the years? It's a question.
Well, it's outrageous, and I'm glad you've got the courage to criticize it. But, I mean, we can't. More and more we see mercenaries being used domestically, foreign groups. This is not the mark of a society going into more liberty. It's the sure sign of a society degrading into despotism.
That's exactly right, and that's what the American people have to understand, have to grasp, have to get hold of before they become like that frog that's slowly cooked in that ever-increasing temperature of the pot that you're in. We have to recognize, in order to hold on to America, to hold on to the freedoms that we cherish, to hold on to those God-given liberties that are affirmed in our Constitution, that we're going to have to be vigilant, that we're going to have to be very vocal and very active in standing up to our government to ensure that our government understands you weren't elected to be a master. You were elected to be a servant. Now get into your servant's role, serve us, protect our freedom, and stop screwing with us.
Well, Representative, I know a lot of police come up and shake my hand all over the country. They're good men and women. But just yesterday, I saw in a neighborhood a warrantless checkpoint. I pulled over on a side street, got out, politely walked over to the state police, and I said, "Hey, troopers, what's going on out here?" And they just said, "None of your business." I mean, screamed at me. This one guy bared his teeth and said, "Get back in your car and leave." And it wasn't an arrest going on, nothing happening. They were just all out there setting up a checkpoint, putting up a tent, blocking part of the road. I drove through and they were looking at me, looking in my car. So I thought, well, I'm not going to be scared of this. I'm going to go confront this and ask and the guy, and I said, well, I have a right to ask you what you're doing. And he said, no, you don't. And you're parked illegally. And I wasn't. I was in a neighborhood parked by, at somebody's house. And I didn't argue with him. I just said, man, you're really treating me bad. And, more and more there's this attitude of we work for the government and we shouldn't ask the government any questions. And as Thomas Jefferson said, when the people are afraid of the government, you have tyranny. When the government's afraid of the people, we have liberty.
That's exactly right. And that's, as you mentioned, the majority of our law enforcement are good men and women who are interested in serving their fellow citizens. But as with anything, whether it's your politicians, your ball players, law enforcement, wherever you find yourself working, there's always someone that's going to be in that position that's going to allow the power to go to their head.
Yeah, well, that was the issue. I mean, I said, "What's your name, trooper?" And he said, "It's Sergeant Baker to you." And the other ones were kind of looking and smiling or, looked uncomfortable because I literally walked up in a charming way and talked to him. And in fact, I hadn't even gotten near him. He came over to me, and I was real polite, and I was about 20 feet from the other troopers, and he just went crazy on me, like I was his slave or something.
Right. Well, it's important for our citizenry to support our law enforcement, support our military, but at the same time to make sure that they stand with the majority of those folks. And not
they shouldn't act
by the unlawful actions or unconstitutional actions of those that are in office or those that are in the bureaucracy that are violating the Constitution or violating the law.
Well, exactly. I mean, he was acting like cops I've seen in third world police states. I mean, we know what tyranny looks like. We know how it walks. We know how it quacks. And it's just scary, but we know why it's happening. Most of the Homeland Security training, over 90%, is for Mr. Metcalfe, Representative Metcalfe. It's for Alex Jones. And I think people better understand that this was bipartisan. These reports that we saw under Obama, sir, I can send you the reports that were issued under Bush. He obviously didn't issue them himself, but the bureaucracy at the top sees the American people as the enemy.
Right. Well, I think that's a very good point. I think it's one that people have to take to heart, one that people have to recognize, so that when they're exercising their right to vote on November 2nd, when they're carrying out and going through their lives, that they understand that you can't let your elected officials just get elected on November 2nd and have a free ride the next 2 years or 4 years or 6 years, whatever that term of office is. We need American citizens to step forward and start holding their elected officials accountable, so the elected officials actually hold the bureaucrats, the bureaucracy that's gone so out of control, accountable, and to rein them back into being a servant of the people.
Absolutely. They are the servants, and they're out of control on every front, and have been given a green light to go wild, and that's what's fueling this massive political awakening. In closing, I'd like to get you back on after the hearings, and I hope that you will call for serious criminal investigations, and I hope people realize this is going on everywhere, and by shining a lot of truth on this, in closing, the news reports the head of Homeland Security in your state is hiding. Do we know where he is?
I do not. I know we sent a letter to the address that he's supposed to be working at, that he's supposed to be employed at. We'll be following up on that letter, as I said, with right to know requests, and hopefully the hearings on Monday will help to find more information that we're seeking in order to determine exactly what did they do with this information. How many Pennsylvanians, law-abiding Pennsylvanians, have come under the scrutiny?
Stay there, sir. All right, Representative Daryl Metcalfe of Pennsylvania runs a mainline Second Amendment group targeted by basically Israeli Mossad front group with the state and the feds, of course, directing the whole situation. It's all illegal. They're in hiding, hoping this all blows over. His website is repmetcalfe.com. You can also go to state legislatures for legalimmigration.com, a group that he helps head up. You got cut off by the break, sir. I wanted you to be able to finish your statements.
Well, no, thanks for having me on, Alex. But we're going to continue to try and dig to the bottom of this, find out what's happened, find out what type of surveillance was taking place on myself and others that have been associated with me and working on trying to stand up for the freedom that we enjoy as American citizens.
And you are the elected representative, so Homeland Security bureaucracy had better not try to keep the legislature from finding out what they're doing. That's the problem. This is a state agency doing this.
That's exactly right. We are the voice of the people. We've been elected to serve the people, and we're going to work to try and find out what's happened here.
In closing, any other points you wanted to make, and some of the other groups they were spying on as well?
Well, I think it's important for all of your listeners to become more actively involved in their government. We do not have enough citizens that are actively involved in holding our elected officials accountable. If we did have, we wouldn't have this kind of out-of-control bureaucracy taking place.
Absolutely. And this is across the political spectrum. I mean, if you are involved in lobbying for anything, I mean, such mainline groups, left, right, libertarian, religious, I mean, this group was spying on everybody, and it wasn't even the state doing it because they clearly couldn't get their own people to break the law. They hired a foreign group, probably of Mossad operators, to do it. This is incredible.
That's exactly right. When you have the State Department, State Department of Homeland Security contracting with an outside company that has strong Israeli ties, it really makes you wonder just how far off the tracks our government's gone.
Well, we better pull up the floorboards and see what's buried under there, and it certainly stinks, and it's going to get a lot worse from here, but it's going to get better in the end, thanks to people like you out there, Representative Metcalfe. God bless you, and I look forward to getting you on next week from a landline after you've had these hearings.
Sounds good, Alex. Have a great day.
Thank you so much. God bless you. Folks, pray for him and others and for the courage he's got.